Hey pole dancer, welcome to the Evidence-Based Pole Podcast. My name is Rosie Boa. I'm a pole dancer, pole teacher, and personal trainer. And I've started this podcast so that we can learn together, talk with the experts, read the research, and feel better on and off the pole. So if that sounds like something you're interested in doing, let's go. So today I want to talk about inverting or other big pole goals, a little bit about how I think about setting goals and how to just check in with yourself and making sure that you're not setting goals that are making your pole life worse rather than better, because I've definitely been guilty of this, and I think it is helpful to, just spend some time when we are thinking about goal setting. And then also talking about inverting specifically. So what are the physical requirements, the prerequisites that I'm like, hey, if you want to get upside down, definitely be able to do this. Some tips for working on inverting, if that's something that you're working on. And then if you are already inverting or you already have something in your repertoire, how to think about making it more artistic and being able to really make it part of your dance and not necessarily just something that you do for a photo once and then put down. And if that's something that you really enjoy, like if you enjoy, sort of the Pokemon collection aspect of doing moves, and that's your goal, then, I think that bit's not going to be as relevant to you. But for me, I really care about dance. That's what I love. And so for me, when I'm learning something technical, the goal is always to be able to put it into a dance. And before we get into it, I will warn you, there are construction sounds in this recording, almost certainly. I've done my best, and it's just loud. So let's talk about goals. I am a big old goal setter. I love goals. I've been talking a lot with my members recently about their goals for the new year. Their goals for going forward, and it's December now, so the new year is, top of mind for everybody. And when we set goals for our movement practice, and particularly an artistic movement practice, I think that it can be sometimes a challenge to pick goals and work towards them in a way that prioritizes our psychological well-being, right? What I mean by that is particularly because, you can just log on to Instagram and spend, 3 hours watching the best pole dancers in the world who do this full-time professionally as their job at the drop of a hat. And then, you see your own practice and you see your own body. And I think comparison is inevitable. And if that comparison comes into our goal setting, and if that is the energy we are taking with us as we're trying to decide how we want to shape our pole practice, I think that it can be, it can really set us up for failure physically, to push ourselves to a place where we might get injured. We're trying to do more than is in our capacity. And also just we won't feel good about ourselves, right? So a great example for this, for my own pole practice is I've kind of wanted to be able to do, a cup grip Aisha for a long time. And it's something that I'll work on and off. Every so often it'll come up in a class I'm taking. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll check in with it. But the thing is, I practice at home alone and I don't have a spot. And that is a movement where I am in a place where in order to progress, I know this about myself, I am going to need a spot and I'm going to need to work physically with a coach, and that's just not an option for me. So if I keep trying to progress, right, and I do, all these conditioning exercises and check in with it occasionally, and I'm not pursuing it in a structured way, and I don't have that physical, instructor or coach working with me to help me with the psychological aspects of it, because I'm just scared, right? Like, regardless of my physical capacity, I need that moral support of a spot from somebody who knows what they're doing and can be like, yeah, go into it or no, come out of it. It's just not going to happen for me, right? I know that in order for me to achieve this goal, I'm going to have to change some pretty big things about my practice that I'm not willing to. And so if I set that as my big goal for, let's say, 2024, the likelihood that I would actually make meaningful progress on it is very low. And the likelihood that I would think about it every time I went to the pole and be like, oh, I'm not doing this thing that I said I wanted to do, which at this point in my practice, again, I know that I will not be able to make meaningful progress on. That's not a good feeling. That's not a great energy to bring to my practice. And it'll also steal joy from other things, right? So when we're setting goals, I think a couple things that can really be clarifying to ask yourselves is A, why do I want to do this thing specifically? And so for me, for Cupcake by Aisha, it's very much like, I'm a pole teacher. I think it's one of those things where I think people kind of expect you to be able to do it, and I can't. And that's okay, right? Like, if the only reason I'm trying to do something is because I think somebody else is going to expect me to do it, that's not a good reason. That's not internal motivation. And when I'm working on it, I'm going to feel, I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel coerced. I might feel a little bit resentful. And no one is actually asking me to do this, right? Like, I'm not working with a doubles partner who's like, we need to be able to both do this to do this specific trick that's in this, required trick suite for the specific competition we're in. There's no specific outside goal that I'm working towards where this is going to fit into it. So for me, it's just like, I think I should be able to do it. And that's not a great reason, right? I don't actually think it looks fun to do. I don't think I will enjoy the sensation. And why? Why would I continue to work on it, right? Whereas, other movements, like something I've been working on a lot as well is handstands. I think the reason that I'm working on handstands so much is that it will really open up a lot of other movements for me. And it is something that I do genuinely enjoy working on. I enjoy working on hand balancing. If I just have like noodle time by myself or I don't have any specific goal, usually I'll do a little bit of hand balancing. Not like... I am a, beginner intermediate sort of level of hand balancer. I'm definitely not, out there doing crazy tricks, but I enjoy working on it. And once I have it, it's something that I think I will use in my dance quite a bit. And it's already something that's opened up more movements for me, getting into and off the pole, right? So like being able to handstand next to the pole has opened up other opportunities for me. I enjoy the way it feels. I feel like it's a challenge that I'm making progress in and can continue to make progress in without that spot that I don't have. So for me, a good goal would be to say, I'm going to work on hand balancing half an hour every week, right? Whereas a bad goal would be, I'm going to get my cup grip Aisha this year. I'm not going to work on it. I know that already going in. So setting that as a goal and reminding myself of what I'm not doing is just, it's not going to be good for me. It's not going to make pole feel better. So I'm just not going to do it. And the other big thing to think about is if you have a big goal, a big movement goal. And I tend to notice this. I tend to notice that polars tend to have specific movements that they're working towards, and they tend to be very, very challenging physical movements. Can you, and be honest with yourself, can you put things down in your life to pick up more practice, more conditioning, right? If you're working with a private coach, can you budget for that, right? Can you budget for more time with that private coach? Do they have capacity to give you more time? If you are trying to achieve something physically that is currently pretty far out of your current set of capabilities, you are going to need to change some things to make meaningful progress on that. And you may or may not genuinely have capacity for that. Right? And I think that that's something to really sit with yourself and think on. So again, with my handstand goal, I can over the course of a week definitely figure out 30 minutes, right? I could do 10 minutes 3 times a week, right? I can, go and get prepped for class a little bit early and spend a little bit of time training before class. That feels very doable for me. Whereas let's say I'm going to add another 2-hour training session once a week, does not feel very doable for me, right? Like I know what my calendar looks like. It don't fit. There's no room for it. So that's the other thing. Like, do you have capacity? Why do you want to do this? And if you're like, I want to do it because I'm intrinsically motivated, I'm really excited about it, and I do have capacity, then yeah, by all means, pick a big goal. Otherwise, pick a little bit more snack sized. So all of that to say, that's some things to think about when you are goal setting. Now let's talk a little bit about inverting specifically. So when I say inverting here, I mean a basic inversion. So this is a movement where you start with your side on the pole, your arms are bent, you lift your legs, you tuck your tailbone under, you extend your arms, and you come into an inverted position where your hips are above your shoulders. And for that movement, there are some specific prerequisites that I like my students to have because I think it really sets you up for success and tells me that you have the physical capacity to start training this. And almost always, so if you're familiar with my idea of the pyramid of pole, the base of the pyramid is physical capacity, the middle of the pyramid is, technical achievement, learning tricks, and then the top of the pyramid is artistry, and you sort of have to go through them in that order. And my strong preference as a coach, particularly an online coach, is that you don't start working on something technical until you already have the strength and flexibility to do it, right? So that means that you are not trying to increase your capacity, right? Build the strength to do a trick that you can't quite do yet by trying to do the trick over and over again. In my experience, that A, it's frustrating. B, you can't do it that much, right? You're very limited in how many repetitions you have. And C, I think the potential for injury tends to be much higher. So that's just my preference. With that in mind, what am I looking for a inversion? So the first and probably biggest thing is, are you comfortable with being upside down, with having your shoulders below your hips, right? Can you do a down dog, right? Can you have your head physically below your hips? And there are, different medical conditions where it may not be recommended. They may tell you like straight up, hey, do not do that, right? Or you may feel uncomfortable about it. You may feel sort of panicky. So a good test for this is if you have like a couch or a couple pillows or something where you can lift your hips and then do sort of like a slow roll down backwards. Can you roll down backwards and end up in a position where your hips are still elevated and your shoulders are on the floor and feel calm while you do it? If you can't, that's something I'd probably address first before trying to go up on the pole, because there's going to be a lot of other things going on. Do you have a basic pole climb? And in particular, can you bring up both legs at the same time in the basic pole climb, right? So this tells me that you have the lower core strength and you have the hip flexor strength to lift both your legs at the same time. I don't necessarily think that you need to have a strict pole crunch to be able to invert. Generally, I find that people arrive at being able to do a strict pole crunch, maybe slightly after they are able to actually invert, but definitely can you lift both legs at the same time in a pole climb? Also, once you're in a pole climb, can you do an upright crucifix? So can you stand all the way up, hold the pole between your ankles, knees, and thighs, and bring your shoulder to the front of the pole so that you have contact points on your hip, your waist, and the back of your armpit. And the reason that I want you to have that before you go upside down is because when you find your inverted position, that's usually the first position you go to from there. And I want you to be able to know those contact points and feel comfortable in them before you're trying to do them upside down. Also, that was how you would free your hands, and probably one of the easier descents from an inverted position is going to require your hands to be free. One of the easier, probably the easiest way is to slowly let yourself slide down while tucking your chin. Also, can you hold your weight in your bent arms on the pole? So I think a good litmus test for this is figurehead, right? So that's where you have the pole in your inside armpit, your hips, the side of your hips are to the pole, your hips are in front of the pole, and you have your inside knee hooked around the pole, and then the outside ankle comes behind the pole. If you can't do that, right, and then maybe play with beginning to take your legs off the pole, that tells me that you are probably, when you begin to try to invert, your arms are going to extend, and instead of having like a little teeter-totter effect, you're going to sort of slowly slide down and have a really hard time actually inverting. Can you do a tricep dip? So this can be on a desk or a counter or a couch or a chair or something, starting with your hands behind you on the thing that is supporting it with your back towards it. Can you bend your elbows down and then straighten all the way? Tricep strength is really important to be able to actually bring yourself upside down. I think it's, for a lot of dancers, I've noticed it tends to be the missing component. So definitely checking in with that and being able to do, I'd say 5 to 6 of those, just body weight. Also, have you worked on floor inverts, or rolling like a ball, I think is the name from Pilates? So this is something that if any of you have trained inversions with me, you know I'm a big fan of. And basically what it is that you start on the floor and you basically do a reverse crunch, except you bring your knees into your armpits and you lift your tailbone up and then down. And you can do that either with both hands overhead or with the pole in your armpit. But I want you to be able to feel that lower core activation and be able to move your hips with your core. Because if you can't do that, it's going to be very challenging for you to invert. So those are sort of the physical requirements that I would definitely recommend that you have before you begin working on inversions at all. And if you don't have them, work on conditioning them individually. And then once you're feeling better about those, then you can start working on the invert. And again, that's just my recommendation. Your instructor may have, well, if you're not working with me, your instructor may have different recommendations, but that's what I would say sort of the table stakes are. So actually working on inversions, or I would say most pole goals. The first thing I would do is, and this is really the place where I think working with a pole specific teacher or coach in particular is very important, because they're going to be able to really understand the mechanics and break it down for you and figure out what your weak spots are and how to address them. But these are just sort of general guidelines. So start on the floor if you can at all, or if you can't start on the floor, start as low as possible. There are a couple of things that I would say are not what's what I'm looking for? This doesn't apply to, but they all have drop in the name. So, and you'll know if you're working on a drop, right? It will not be a surprise that this movement is a drop. So start nice and low, start on the floor if you can. You can also work with props, something, or spotters or rubber bands, something to hold some of your body weight so that it's not as effortful for you to find the position. Also, when you're working on a new technical thing, particularly if it is new to you, don't try it too many times, right? I think a good general litmus test is no more than 5 to 10 times per side. And I would say the 10 times per side things would be for things like a new spin, if you are already spinning confidently, and the 5 times per side things would be like, inversion if you're not currently inverting, right? You're going to start to get tired. You don't have this motor pattern down, right? And the potential for injury as you are still trying to figure out how to do this movement at all, let alone efficiently, is just going to sort of shoot up the more tired you are and the more times you do it. And you'll just come back and do it the next class, right? Repetition is really important here. Give yourself time to sleep on it. And I think the sort of final tip to keep in mind when you're working on a specific new pole technical movement is if you are trying to do something and it just feels impossible, it feels like whatever you're trying to do, it's not working and you can't even begin to see how to get to there, you are doing a modification that is inappropriate for you right now, right? So you're going to need some sort of regression or modification or a variation or even a progression, something that's going to make it easier for you to find the movement in your body so you can actually start to make, meaningful progress with every repetition. So a great example of this for something where, for me, I was taught something where the regression, the easier thing, was way harder, was for I think it was for Marley, actually, or it may have been for Dangerous Bird. But anyway, it's for a movement where you have a knee hooked and you reach back and you grab the ankle of that knee. And the original regression that I was taught was to grab both ankles with both arms. And the idea there from the instructor was that was going to be a little bit more secure. Unfortunately, it requires a lot of flexibility in a direction I'm not super flexible. And also I have really short arms. So I was having a really hard time grabbing my ankles. And when I was just like, I'm going to just try it without grabbing my ankles, I had instant success because I had all the other sort of building blocks, set up and I was ready to do it. But it was the ankle grabbing that was holding me back and not, my contact points or security on the pole. So that's just an example. Just because you need a modification or different movement, it does not necessarily mean that the movement you're going to end up doing is going to be easier in a sort of a broad sense. So those are some things to think about when you're working on a goal. And very much work with a coach, very much work with a teacher. Try to get feedback if you can. If you are working on something that is technically new to you, I think, I don't do Instagram tutorials. You may have noticed this for specific moves. And there are some very good reasons for that. And something that's going to, anyway, I got good reasons for that. I don't do it. I really think that live feedback from, video feedback from a professional is really the best way to make progress. I also do not try and just teach myself up from tutorials. I also work with coaches and teachers. So I'm not just saying that. I'm walking the walk. All right. So you got the physical requirements, you've been working on the technical, right? We're going up the pyramid. And once you have mastered a move, right? And I would consider, my sort of test of mastery is, can I do it, let's say, 8 times per side in a single class with 100% success rate, and also not feel like it is sketchy, right? Feel very secure in it every time. At that point, I'm like, yes, I absolutely have this, no problem. Then you can really start working on the artistry components. And this is, I know it's not a big goal for everybody, but for me, when I'm learning something in pole, I am learning it specifically because I want to put it in my freestyle dance. I want to, add a color to my palette that I can paint with in my art. And that's the point of pole for me, right? It's the dance. And learning something technical is giving me more tools that I can use in the dance, but it's not the whole point in and of itself. At least for me, I know other people feel differently. So once you're feeling really, really good in a movement, I think there are some things that you can start to play with to really begin to unlock the potentials of that movement. So the first thing I would do is I would really identify what is holding you on the pole, right? So in a in your basic invert position, once your legs are on the pole, what's holding you on the pole is your hip, your waist, your armpit, and your legs. But there's a little bit of redundancy there, right? You don't necessarily need all of those parts to keep you on the pole. So what happens if maybe your front ankle extends and comes off the pole? Are you still secure? What happens if you reach down with your arms? Your armpit comes off the pole. Are you still secure? Can you begin to start to move, either remove points of contact safely, right? Again, this is only for movements that you are already completely confident in, and ideally that you're working with a coach with, and see, what are the real possibilities of this movement? What are the edges of it? Also, just playing with it, right? So for me, I like to put on music, and music, not necessarily music that is, listen, I love a good slow sensual song. I would definitely, say do some of those, but also try to find other types of music that really make you want to move and that you can explore and play to, and try doing the same movements to really different types of music, and see how it feels, see what you like, see what you don't like, right? All of that is signal. And this is, something that we talk about a lot in my freestyle flow classes on Wednesday. When you are practicing your artistry, some of it will feel good. It should not all feel good if what you are trying to do is explore and discover new things about your movement. And also combine it with other things you really already know. I find that particularly for students who are more trick driven, oftentimes once you achieve a big goal, a big pole goal, it's easy to forget about those things that you have already mastered, those things that are already in your movement vocabulary that you can really explore and play with and expand upon in your dance. And I find for myself, and also I notice in my students, there's sort of a cycle, right? Where I'll have, there's a movement that I'm just really, really drawn to. It comes into, a whole bunch of different freestyles just sort of on its own accord, and then there'll sort of be like a passage of time, and then something else I'll really pick up and be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm really, really working on now and really excited about, and just sort of is coming out in my body. So for me right now, I'd say the big thing that's like just sort of happening all the time is It's like Stargazer, but with the top leg, instead of externally rotated, it's internally rotated, and then grabbing that ankle and making it a big back bend. So it's a little bit like Dangerous Bird, but the back leg is in front of the pole and the shin is pressing into the pole, so you can be a little bit more outright from the pole. And just like half the freestyles I've done this month, last month, it's just showed up in, and it felt really good every time. So that's sort of what I'm thinking about right now, and playing with different ways of getting into and what I can do with my arms, and different ways of getting out of, and how can I explore this thing that I'm currently really enjoying playing with. So that is, I know, a little bit of a brain dump, but just some things I've been thinking about that I thought might be helpful for people. We talked about goal setting, some qualities you can check in with yourself in, oh my gosh, it's so loud, about goals, right? Why do you want to do this? Is it something that's internally motivated that you want to do for its own reasons? That's probably going to be something you'll have more success with than something that's externally motivated and someone else has told you or made you feel like you should want to do. If it's a big physical goal, can you devote more time? And then we talked about, or time, energy, resources. And then we talked about the physical requirements for going upside down and inverting, and what I'd recommend you have. How to work on technical moves, some tips there, and then thinking about artistry a little bit. And I'm going to wrap it up now because the lull is over. And so I hope this was helpful for you, and I'd really love to hear from you if there are any particular goals you're working on, or maybe there's a goal that you were thinking about and now you're reconsidering. I'm always happy to hear. You can reach out to the podcast comment sections or whatnot, or of course you can reach me on Instagram. I'm at slink_through_strength, or you can hit me up at info@slinkthroughstrength.com. So I'd love to see you, maybe dance with you at some point, if that's something that works out for you, if you've got a home pole. And if not, I will talk with you very, very soon. Have a good day. Thanks so much for joining me today, pole dancer. This podcast is a production of Slink Through Strength, the inclusive, evidence-based online pole studio. So if you're looking for a place to train, either off-pole conditioning and flexibility, or learning pole tricks and refining your pole movement, you can find us online at slinkthroughstrength.com.